good evening. So we are actually going to stand in between dinner. So we're going to keep it tight and concise. So we have 30 minutes. You're good? 30 minutes for the panel. My name is Asif Saleh. I'm the executive director of BRAC. And we have a couple of fantastic panelists today. Dr. Sanjay K. Bhardwaj from India, Professor of South Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We have Dr. Erin Watson, who's the chair of the advisory board for National Center of Student Equity in Higher Education and Curtin University in Australia. And what we are going to talk about today is the interplay of the global north and global south in geopolitics in development. And as somebody who works in development as the chief executive of BRAC, this is something that we are very much aware of, particularly in the context of development. Just for context, the word global south, global north is familiar to many of us, but if not, to some of you, global south refers to particularly low-income countries from the developing world, as opposed to global north, which is essentially predominantly from North America, Western and European, more developed economy. You've heard quite a lot about this in the recent COP discussion, where developed countries first time actually agreed to set up loss and damage fund to compensate for the sort of damage in the climate, particularly for the climate vulnerable countries. So this tension is very much sort of there, present, and we heard about it in the last panel a little bit. And so we have 30 minutes, so we'll take 20 minutes for our panelists, and then we'll go to Q&A from the audience if there is any. So my first question is for Dr. Bhardwaj. So recently, as all of you know, that there has been India's foreign minister recently in an interview said, when asked about the Ukraine-Russia war, he said, "I'm not sitting on the fence just because I don't agree with you. It means I'm sitting on my ground." So this interview got a lot of airtime in the social media and widely circulated, and perhaps was an example of global south not really towing the line of global north in global policy, in deciding its foreign policy and asserting itself more strongly in the global stage. So not just security, as I was mentioning, in development as well, there was a big debate around decolonization of development. And so my question to Professor Bhardwaj is that unpack this for us a little bit as an academic, and how do you see this tension unraveling?
Thank you, Chair. You know, before coming to the Indian position and what the Foreign Minister Jaishankar had talked about Indian foreign policy and Indian stand, that is not sitting on the fence, is on the ground. Definitely, it's very pragmatic approach, very important. But before going to India's approach in the present global order, let me put 2-3 very important aspects to understand the global south, and then where we as India stands in this global south. First thing, be very clear that in two very significant incidents, one is of course the pandemic, COVID-19, and the second is the Soviet or I would say Russian action in Ukraine. These are the two very critical, very significant incidents had happened and going on. Given a two very clear impression that, in my understanding, one is that international institutions like the UN, WHO during the COVID-19 had been questioned. I would not say they failed to control the pandemic or they failed to control the Russian action in Ukraine, but is that they have been questioned that what is their role being an international institution. Second, and that gives an impression that the international system has become a self-help system. That the country has to fortify its border, country has to protect their people, country has to protect from the external aggression, and country has to protect their people from the any kind of pandemic and all that. This is first submission of mine. The second thing is that I do find that the neo-liberal ideology had been overloaded by the neo-realist or neo-realism in the recent past. Keeping these developments into mind, you see where the world is moving ahead. The world is moving towards the military alliances. Now, we are not much focusing about the economic alliances in the last few years. We are talking about NATO's expansion. We are talking about Quad. We are talking about AUKUS. We are talking about that the Russians, they had come out, CSTO. Kind of organizations are dominating the discourse. And where the world is moving towards arms and nuclearizations. The countries have started emphasizing they're trying to become missile men. They're trying to become a nuclear country. They're trying to become and getting more and more arms and ammunition from different. I think that is the fundamental factors that you are indicating that all the countries in the world are important, particularly a emerging power, that is India, emerging economic power, that is India, and to protect India from the external aggression, number one, you need definitely a constant support from different corners. We had 4 foundational agreements with the Americans. The 4 foundational, very core agreements, but we are also maintaining very close military engagements with the Russians. We are getting all kinds of arms and military supports. So, and we have, the first session we have talked a lot about the Chinese, and the Chinese aggression we have seen over the borders in Doklam or Pulwama and all these things that the Chinese aggressions the world has seen in South China Sea and other parts. So we are very conscious that India had been doing very conscious military diplomacy. We had developed strategic partnership with the 37 countries all over the world. Number 2, that we are also going very carefully about the military engagement, economic engagement and economic integration. For that, the energy security is another aspect that India is looking. Definitely any country in the world, we want to sustain our economic growth. We want to continue, there is a constant demand from 2 to 3% for the energy to sustain the economic growth, 6 to 7% in India. And we are looking that affordable, uninterrupted supply of energy resources from different corners. So we are trying to have the energy transitions through the technology within the countries, but we are also exploring the overseas avenues of getting energy resources. India had invested around $16 billion in energy sectors of Russia. And we are hoping, we are looking forward to have more and more energy cooperations with Russia. So my point is there, while the things are going on, or the fights are going on between Russia or Ukraine, or I would say Russia and NATO, or I would say directly Russia and Americans, that India had adopted very, very carefully that an independent states. That has been demonstrated in other cases also. So what India believes in independent foreign policy. And in that independent foreign policy, India maintains strategic autonomy. And at the same time, India also believe in multi-aligned foreign policy. We are aligned with the Quad, but we are also a member of SCO. We are also a member of BRICS. And whatever the regional and international organizations that benefits to India's economic growth as well as for the security, we are aligned with them. So we are very, very, very careful. We are not, and that I would say we are having very independent foreign policy. It may be, I would not term it, it's non-aligned foreign policy, but of course we are having very independent foreign. Two things I would like to add about the global south, and in the context of global south, where the world is going. In the international relations, two trends are currently evident further to understand the global south stance, because India's role is going to increase in near future. India has taken the presidency of G20. India has also become the president of SCO. And of course, in UN Security Council, India will be the president for the next month. India's role is very critical to have to lead the concerns of the global south, particularly in two areas. One is, of course, climate change that has been negotiated in detail in 27th COP meeting, and you know that the discussions had gone one day, had extended for one day to have climate justice. And you know the way the climate finance was to be allocated for that, and that had been decided finally that 500 millions would be converted into $1 trillion by 2030. That kind of negotiations, which are the countries, the global south, because they are looking the climate finance from the developed countries to bear it. And of course, the second is from the Doha round, it had come out with on the trade and commerce in the commerce sector, and there we are also aligned with Chinese in some cases about the trade negotiations with climate change issues and all that. So I do find that what international the two trends are currently evident in the context of global order. First, the discipline no longer views as global. Discipline no longer views as the global order as monolithic, but rather as a system of layered order operating at multiple levels and encompassing areas that spans from political, security, economic, socio-cultural, environmental issues. The second point is that the traditional notion of global order, understood in terms of polarity and state centricity, are changing to accommodate shifts in the distribution of power and emergence of multiple actors and multiple areas. The multi-level, multi-factored, and multi-causal transition necessitates a re-emerging of global order in present context. There are states in the globally. Some of states are system determining states, as Robert Keown has talked about, that system determining states, system influencing states. There are system affecting states, what we talk about the middle power today is in the context of Bangladesh and Thailand and Malaysia and all that. And of course, that system in effectual states that are not, they are there, but they are not having that kind of system. These states are trying to graduate themselves. That system influential states are trying to become system affecting states, and system influential states are trying to become system determining states, and that creates a multipolarity that creates a lot of different layers. It's not remain monolithic. Politically, it is unipolar.
Yeah, thank you.
Militarily, it is bipolar, and economically, it is multipolar. The world is emerging because of the states are asserting to become, trying to graduate themselves from one stage to other states, and that is challenging the present global order, particularly in the context of the emerging new scenario.
Thank you. This is a very good segue to the next question, that moving from unipolar to multipolar, and it's not a monolithic world anymore. So from that context, in the development space, for example, we see a lot of this is around that the traditional notion of development used to be that from global north, certain prescription would come. This is how things would happen, and then this would be implemented in the global south. That is being questioned, that is being challenged by also a lot of organizations from this area. So my question to you, Dr. Watson, is that, Australia has recently come to some criticism about its immigration policy, its climate change policies. Is the global north ready for a reboot or restructuring of this multipolar world that we are talking about and the new realities, and how is it adjusting itself? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a really, really good question. And obviously I come from the global north, though I kind of live down there. But anyway, I want to bring this to life a little bit in the sense that give you a real example of where I think that these imbalances, and in a country like Australia, you touch on our immigration policies, which now I don't speak on behalf of the government at all, and I can't sit there and defend them because, it's so problematic, some of the things that, the way these things are structured. So I want to bring that to life for you. So at the moment, Australia is chasing India, right? We want a really high quality free trade agreement with India. For strategic and economic purposes, obviously trying to diversify away from China, and we've been somewhat successful in some industries in doing that. But we've got really big ambitions, and I don't think that many people in Australia actually understand India that well and understand that when it comes to sensitive industries, forget it. It's not going to happen. We need to diversify beyond India. But Australia can't quite get their heads around that yet. So we did see the trade agreement, the interim agreement ratified today, excluding all of those sensitive industries. So let's park that for a second. And I'll give you a real example of something that happened to a colleague of mine from Bombay who was flying into Australia to participate at a conference. So this is the country that we want to be, really close partners with because, they're going to be a top 4 economy by the middle of the century, along with Indonesia, and you can apply this experience to Indonesia as well. So this person coming to Australia, they'd been invited by a university. It was funded by, I think, the American government because that's what they do. And she put in all of her paperwork for her visa. She had the letters, she had the accommodation, she sent in her bank accounts, which is wild to me. Her bank accounts, sent in who her parents were, which again, although India does ask that for us as well, and it was rejected. And she was so upset. I've now revealed that it was a woman, but anyway, this person was really upset, and I think the gender dynamic's really important here as well. They did eventually get to Melbourne, and we actually got to have brunch together, which is where I heard this story, and it was really fantastic to see her. But now she'll have forever on her record that she's had a visa rejected. And the only way that she got to get her visa was, 1, pulling a few strings with some people that she knew in the department, but 2, that she was able to prove that she wasn't going to overstay her visa, that she was going to return home, that she had full intentions of leaving Australia at the end of her program. The flip side to all of this is that, and I've been working in and out of India for over 10 years, and once upon a time I used to have to get a visa in my passport. But these days, I log on to a system, which is a little bit slow sometimes, but that's okay. I log on to a system and I do it electronically within 24 hours. They do ask who my husband is and they ask who my dad is. That's fine, I just write their details in. And within 48 hours or 24 hours usually, I have an e-visa. And then when I arrive in Delhi or wherever I arrive, I walk straight through the front door and no one asks me if I'm going to overstay my visa. And to be quite frank, sometimes I think I might. Not really for anyone here listening. But I think that this kind of goes to, again, that power dynamic that continues to perpetuate, despite the fact that obviously in this increasingly multipolar world, and with these countries like Indonesia and India, that a country like Australia is really chasing economically and strategically, we just don't seem to be able to unpack those power dynamics, and we're not comfortable with letting go of that power that countries like Australia and others continue to have. So that very briefly answers that for you. I'm very mindful of time, but I think that kind of illuminates this north-south dynamic that I think will continue to persist. And I think it's if I may make one more comment, part of this is political in Australia. So, only 50 years ago, Australia had White Australia policy. Australia now has 50% of the population born overseas or has one parent born overseas, and I think it's around 30% were born overseas. So now incredibly diverse, and India is our largest source of migrants. China is probably our second. Southeast Asia is very high as well. So it's an increasingly Asian country as well. The political parties don't look like that, but at least, everyday life in Australia is much more Asian. But the point I'm trying to make is that our institutions are still very colonial. They are still very dominated by white Australia. And a lot of the way that politics plays out is that migrants are used, and the Global South is used in that process. So, many of you would have heard about Operation Sovereign Borders policy, where if you came to Australia on a boat, it was guaranteed you'd never be resettled in Australia. You would be settled in a third country, and then exploiting other Global South countries in the process. So really, we've got a really historical abomination, I can't string a sentence together, record of using this stuff in political campaigns, in using this to win votes, to be, we want to protect your jobs, jobs for Australians, this kind of thing. Although, after the pandemic, we're like, where do we get people from? Because we shut our borders for 2 years, So I think there's some really hard truths here that a country like Australia and others in the global north need to face.
It's very interesting that, thanks for the frank acknowledgement that it is also a multidimensional, not everybody is ready to make this political adjustment. So maybe in 2 minutes or so, how should the global south, and kind of extrapolating from India a bit, compete in this new space to have a more equitable conversation? I mean, whether it's knowledge space or other space, how do you think we should elevate our game?
Thank you for asking this.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking this question. There is a debate between the exceptionalism and universalism. And the universalism basically had been dominated by the Western construct, the American political science or social sciences. They have been dominating and having a single vocabulary, theory, constructs, and understanding the world by themselves. This global south has created a different knowledge base, and that is the exceptionalism that is not accepted by the Western constructs. And they are trying to they are trying to add the values in the global south by creating their own vocabulary. They are creating their own discourse on different issues of, as I said, about the climate change, about the trade, about the power, about the different concepts of that international relations and this. So global south, what they are, for example, I would say the global south is emphasizing that we should talk about responsibility while protecting instead of responsibility to protect. The responsibility to protect is basically a Western construct, and the global south is giving an alternative discourse, is responsibility while protecting. Or you can say that the notion of emerging power instead of pivotal states. That should not be, the notion of emerging power should be used. Third, we talk about dialogue between the civilizations, the Chinese civilizations, Indian civilizations, instead of talking the clash of civilizations. The clash of civilizations again is the Western construct. And you will see the talking about the economic aid, we should talk about the developmental assistance. That kind of discourse, vocabulary, theories, understanding of global south will definitely add to the knowledge society. Now, the authors, the writers, like in India, Kautilya has given its theory about Mandal theories, that the realist discourse, much before Morgenthau and Machiavelli, had not been recognized what they are understanding. Santu, and that you will see is his writing, the realism and all that. These global South's writing and understanding about different concepts of the world should be re-emphasized, re-imagined in a way so that, and there, I think the global South, where I'm talking about the Asian countries, the Latin American countries, and the African countries, they can create a dominant discourse to understand, to pursue their objectives, to have a dialogue with the global North. And while you will have that kind of vocabulary, understanding, knowledge, concepts, and different constructs, then you will be in better position to have a better dialogue with the global North.
Absolutely. I mean, Jugaad innovation is one example that now we're calling frugal innovation that started from India. Now it's been a kind of a worldwide, it's known about this. So, I mean, maybe last question to you. I mean, there's a lot of changes happening in this world. Big tech taking over global conversations to climate change adaptation. And there will be dynamics that will be changing over the coming years and this decade. How do you see this relationship between North and South evolve in this coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could stare into a crystal ball and tell you, but I think what's really interesting is we're already seeing some of these challenges play out in a place like Australia. So, I guess, with the technology and the digital economy, which are really big issues across all of the big multilaterals at the moment and the minilaterals, is that Australians, where we've had historically very high wages, very high minimum wage, and we've prospered and been very fortunate for that. But we're actually now playing in a global labour market. And that puts a lot of pressure on what's going on in Australia, because when I want to hire a graphic designer, I can jump on Fiverr. Well, actually now I use Canva, so Canva stuffed that for everyone. but I can hire someone in Argentina to be a PA for me who speaks wonderful English, university educated. Uber's a top 100 university, really highly ranked law school. And I can hire someone for about $800 a month. If I want to hire that person in Australia, that's going to cost me, I don't know, $7,000 a month or something. So I think with that globalization of the labour market, that's a changing dynamic. And that's not a bad thing, because that can also lift up, right? Yeah. So I see that as a really positive thing. You can be giving jobs all over the place. So I think that this is where a country like Australia, where it's so used to having this incredibly privileged position, and I think that this doesn't even just go internationally. It's also domestically for us with our First Nations people, and facing up to some of those really hard truths where people don't finish school, their life expectancies are 20 or 30 years less than if you are a white Australian. So we've got some really hard reckoning with what our place is in the world as a modern Australia, and how all of those power dynamics are going to change. And we see this in the security relationship. We see, countries like, look at what's going on in the Solomon Islands right now with Australia. It's, and our often very paternal approach to these things. We don't have a strong history of working in the Pacific. In the development sector, yes, and AusAid, yes, but not in a security context, not in a broader economic context, and these countries actually wield a lot of power in those negotiations, and the way that they can work. So that's a change in power balance, because now all of a sudden the Solomon Islands has a lot more ability to negotiate and make their own decisions. So that's and I think Australia really struggles with that. So interesting times ahead.
Interesting times ahead indeed. Unfortunately, we have just about 1 minute. So maybe just take one quick question. Well, there are two questions. Yeah? Okay, all right. So, and then please do. Just let me take the questions, and then we'll close the panel with the final answers. Please make it a quick question, yeah?
Maintaining its independent foreign policy. and it has strategic autonomy. How do you justify that? Because you are buying your arms from Russia, or oil and fuel from Russia, and you have gone to Quad, you have signed a lot of defense and nuclear pacts with Japan and United States. So does it really justify that you are enjoying strategic autonomy? Thank you.
Yeah, please.
My question is very simple, that why are we reification, why do we reifying North and South, Global North? Countries that are in Global South will not remain in Global South forever. And the example is Singapore. So why can't we take a more dynamic approach rather than a very binary classification and revolve around that binary?
The definitions are problematic anyway, really problematic. So,
Okay, last question and then we'll close up. Yeah.
Hello, dear speakers. Thank you for your addressing your country and your South Asian region and the Northern region. Well, I'm an architect. I'm working for disaster management in my country. Dr. Erin was addressing about the democracy theory, and Dr. Sanjay, he was addressing about the 4 policies we use with the Northern era. So my question is both to the speakers, especially Dr. Erin, that your country is not actually working for socio-cultural issues in my country. And when I see about Southern region, the Southern region, we have got lots of scholars, and we're not geotechnically developed yet. After the pandemic, for the recent 4 years, your country has no issues.
Can you please ask the question?
Yeah. I'm going to the question.
No,
just addressing the thing.
Just the question, please.
Okay. My question is to the Northern, Global North, how they are actually geotechnically supporting my country and the Southern region. And the Southern region, which is a hot pressure cooker, like there's the family base. We're not working culturally in our family side or sector. So what is the global North issues about the family practice for the Southern part?
I've got a problem
Which is
with
very
the premise,
important.
which Australia did just give $150 million, I think, last week to Bangladesh. So
I mentioned
it's not giving
socio-cultural
nothing.
issues.
Okay,
is.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and
Thank you.
I head BRAC, and Australia is one of the largest strategic partner for us as well. So, but maybe the question around just not getting stuck in this binary and having a more dynamic definition quickly, and then.
I mean, I think I responded and made the point because I was very mindful of time that I actually think that the definitions are really problematic in the first place. So the premise of the whole question and talking about global north and south, I mean, there are other more modern ways to talk about this. I think the premise around dependency ratio, oh my gosh, now that's labour market statistics, but about dependency theory is still very much there. But if you look at dependency theory, that's even a lot more dynamic in and of itself in the way it defines countries, and countries can move in and out of different layers. So I think that you're absolutely right. We need to talk about it in a more dynamic way. Definitions are always problematic when they're so binary and so categorical.
Very, very brief. Foreign policy, of course, you are not aligned either or. You are taking independent stance on international issues, global issues. That is independent foreign policy. And I think what India, they had made significant changes in organizational within the country as well. It's a PMO-centric approach now, and they are taking very independent stance. Did not sided with Russia or America, and we have talked that we are law-abiding country, rule-based system, and there should be dialogue and discussions, and the conflict should be resolved. So I would find that we are maintaining strategic autonomy, but at the same time, we are also having independent foreign policy. For sir, in fact, what I said that the global south, basically that they have to reimagine or they are reimaging or emanating from the global south that includes dependency theories. the notion of human development, and the principle of differentiating responsibilities. These are the three important tasks that the global south has to develop to have to come out from the global north's construct, domain, or hegemon, in fact. And like in the globalization, I'm giving you examples. You cannot decide and the nature, degree of or direction of globalizations, but you can have your weightage to determine the terms of your development, having collective approach and voices of the global south with vis-a-vis the global north. These are the submissions that I wanted to make. Thank you.
So much, my panelists, and really appreciate all your time. And I think, this is TBD. I think this sort of conversations are very, very helpful, particularly from as we there are rising tension, but at the same time, this tension can be constructive as well. So, and I want to conclude this panel and at the same time, thank all of you for being a patient listener. Thank you so much.